Hello.
Hello, Malaya.
So I've actually got to get something real quick. I will be right back. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Um,
I've got a little bit of an intro anyway, so.
okay, awesome. I'll be right back.
Connecting. Hey, Malaya, can you hear us? Malaya, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you can hear us. Thanks for coming today. Yeah, my name is Dave Cook. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Research here at UAH. So this program that we're doing this summer is called Virtual Outreach. And before COVID, we used to do this in person, have students come to our campus. And basically what we're highlighting here is some of the undergraduate research that's going on with our students and our faculty here on campus during the summer. So we have a summer program called the Summer Community of Scholars, and UAH students can participate in this. So may I ask, are you a high school student or an incoming freshman?
Incoming freshman.
Okay, great. So this is something that you could apply for. The application will come out in the fall. So definitely look at your UAH email for that. There will be an application window open both for the honors program and the RCEU, and they'll have all the details about applying. And then if you're selected, you would work with a faculty member next summer, basically, and it's a what is it, 10-week program that basically is the same as the summer semesters, and you get paid a stipend of $3,750. So it's enough, you can pay your rent and you can buy food and things like that. So you don't have to have a part-time job. You can kind of just focus on the research. So later at the end of this, I will put a link in the chat that just goes to a webpage that talks more about the program. So I don't want to take any more time from Ariana, but Ariana is one of our students who's doing research this summer, and I will let her introduce herself and introduce the project she's working on as well.
All
Ariana,
right. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay, awesome. My name is Ariana Kolanjani, and this summer I am researching mental health treatment service exposure in LGBTQ plus college students of color. So before we get started, I'm gonna talk a little bit about like why I'm in this research and why I'm doing it, just my major and stuff like that. So I'm a rising junior here at UAH. I'm a communications art major, and I am minoring in sociology. Some of the stuff that I'm involved in on campus that kind of relates to this, I'm a College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences ambassador, and basically we just represent the College of Arts here at UAH. So if you have any questions about this specific college at UAH, please feel free to ask. I'm also the College of Arts Social Media Outreach Assistant, which means I just create content for the social media for the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, post things like that. I'm also the UAH Toastmasters president. It's a public speaking club here at UAH, and I think it's really cool. It's a new club. So if you're interested in like extracurriculars, things like that, feel free to ask about that as well. I'm also involved in Greek life at UAH. So kind of why I chose this program at UAH, I'm really passionate about research and this topic in general, and I felt like this program would be the perfect opportunity to like research about this topic and get some more experience. I do want to go to graduate school and get a PhD, so I thought that applications for grad school, they really emphasize that you should be doing undergraduate research, internships, things like that. So I thought that this program would be great for that, just because I would have that research experience already, which is a big component of grad school. I also took Dr. Lanius's communication research methods class, I think like 2 semesters ago, I think. And it was great. I learned about all the elements of research, and this is kind of where I got the start for my project. We did little mini research projects like we would write a literature review. We wrote like an analysis, things like that. And I chose this topic actually to write about for a lot of the elements of that class. So I just kind of built off of the mini research I did in that class. So this is kind of what I'm going to be talking about today in regards to my study. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the objective of the study, and it's right here, but I'll explain it more in the next slide. I'm also going to be talking about the preparation for research, which involves the Institutional Review Board, also known as the IRB here at UAH, the data type and collection, which I did interviews, which is qualitative research. I'm also going to be talking about the analysis, like how I analyze the data, which my data is in the form of transcripts, and the results. So here's the objective of my research. So this is just, the formal definition, not definition, but like the formal way of saying that I am studying mental health treatment exposure in college students of color that are also part of the LGBTQ plus community. So basically, I'm trying to see if they have like unique experiences with mental health treatment services, if they have any obstacles that they face, things like that. So kind of the reason I chose this was because when I was in the communications research methods class, like I was talking about earlier, there wasn't a lot of research about the intersection on mental health treatment services exposure and sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, gender, and college status. There was a lot of things about mental health treatment and former research that has been done about like white people of color, not white people of color, white LGBTQ plus people. But there wasn't a lot about LGBTQ plus people that were people of color. And I also wanted to explore the college status in this research, as well as gender. So that's kind of why I chose this research. So the preparation for this study was pretty extensive, more than I was expecting, but I got through it okay. So if you choose to do human subject research, I think it's a pretty cool opportunity just to get some practice, for IRB things. So basically, the Institutional Review Board is also called the IRB, and I got this definition from the UAH website up here. But basically, it's like all research involving human subjects has to be approved by the IRB, and this is just basically so that the safety of the participants can be ensured. And it's all about ethics, basically, and this is specifically for human subject research. So I know like some biology and nursing students have to go through it, for if they want to like draw samples of blood, things like that. But also if you're like interviewing people like I am. So it really reaches a wide variety of people and fields. So I needed IRB approval since I'm interviewing human participants. Kind of about the IRB process, there's a lot of forms to fill out. That includes just general information about the study, excuse me, how to protect human subjects during the research, and the research plan. So I had to basically plan out my entire research and submit that to the IRB, things down to the social media thing I was posting to recruit the participants, things like that. So I basically had my entire research already planned out before I started because the IRB needed that approval. So that was very helpful. So here's some information about the data types and collections. So I am doing qualitative research in the form of interviews. So qualitative research is basically just like non-numerical data that you're researching. So things like interviewing people, surveys that involve, just like short answers, things like that. So I really enjoy qualitative research, actually. I'm not the best at numbers, so qualitative research is where it's at for me. So for the interviews, I had 10 participants that are LGBTQ plus and people of color in college. And they had to fit these 3 criteria because that's the niche I was kind of researching. So I gave them a Google form and they had to identify, yes, I'm a person of color, and yes, I am LGBTQ plus. And yes, I am currently in college and within the age range, things like that. So that was really important. And before I interviewed them, so one thing that the IRB requires is that they have consent forms that they should sign and date. So I got the template from the IRB and, just put in my information there. They signed the consent form to make sure they knew what they were getting into, the risks and everything. And there weren't that many risks. It was just like psychological risks that they may feel uncomfortable while talking about certain subjects, things like that. And to do the interviews, I did Zoom interviews because I did not just research and do information with like people at UAH. I interview people like across the country, like people from like California, Georgia, just all over, Most of them were from Alabama though, because, it's easier to reach that population here since I am from Alabama. And so sorry if you guys hear noise in the background, I'm dog sitting right now. She's playing with her bone. But there are 3 categories of questions that I asked. I asked questions about their self-identity. So things like, what do you identify your sexuality? What do you identify your gender? What is your race and ethnicity? Things like that. And then the second category I asked about was mental health treatment exposure. So like, have you got to therapy? Are you currently receiving mental health treatment? Things like that. And then I also asked questions about the intersectional experience, which basically just combines the identity portion and the mental health treatment exposure portion. So things like, have you experienced discrimination based on your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, things like that. But I also asked questions like, have you ever felt uncomfortable with seeking out these services because of your race or ethnicity or gender and sexual orientation? And then the final aspect of the data collection was that I compensated my participants. So compensation for participants is a bit tricky because you can do monetary compensation, basically like giving them a gift card or things like that. And I chose to give them an Amazon gift card that was worth $15 for each participant. And the reason I say that it might be a little tricky is because you don't want to give them so much money that they're incentivized to, and they feel like they have to do this research. So I wouldn't give them like $200 for each participant, but I wouldn't give them like, I don't know, like $1 for each participant, because then they wouldn't want to participate. So I thought $15 was pretty good for, the average college student. And I know a lot of college students use Amazon, so it's convenient. So I thought that was a good option. So now I'm going to move into the analysis portion of it. So the kind of analysis that I used was thematic analysis. So this is basically just a qualitative data analysis method, like I mentioned before, non-numerical, that involves reading through a data set. In my case, that would be transcripts from the data and the interviews. And it's basically just used to identify patterns across meaning in the data. So I use this in the form of coding. And by coding, I don't mean like, writing code for a computer or anything like that. It's more of like a qualitative analysis, which involves identifying common themes in the transcripts to categorize the codes and establish a framework of ideas that are like related to each other, things like that. And I will show you my diagram that I made of all the codes later in the next slide, I believe. But here is an example of one code that I used. It's a very basic code. It was like the first code I identified. So like, again, a code is like, it can be a phrase or it can be a topic that you realize comes up a lot in your research. So one topic that I found that came up a lot in my research was the sexual minority / LGBTQ plus code. So after you find the code, which you can find by either reading through the transcripts, or you can identify codes before you read through the transcripts. There's two ways to do that. So I did both of those actually. After you do that, you create a definition for the code in the context of your research. So LGBTQ plus could mean like, for some people it can mean gay, for some people it can mean bisexual, but in my case, it means any sexuality that is not heterosexual. It also means in opposition to heterosexuality. And one thing I realized in my research was that a lot of the participants had complicated attachment to non-heterosexual labels. So for this example, for each code and definition, you need to have an example to back up what you're saying. So here's a quote from one of my participants. They said, "I usually just use the term queer as like an umbrella term because labeling has always really stressed me out." So that comes back to the not heterosexual in opposition to heterosexuality, complicated attachment to non-heterosexual labels. So I thought that was pretty neat. And I did this for all the codes. I had about probably over 10 codes that I did. And I will discuss the codes more later in the next slide. So here is my model. It's kind of hard to read like this part of it, but yeah, I'm probably going to edit this later, but this is just like a rough draft of my diagram. But basically, this is a model, and a model is a visual diagram used to represent the relationship between the codes that you have found in your transcript data. So I thought this was really interesting because this is kind of where it gets a little bit more complicated than just identifying separate codes. You have to kind of realize how they are all interconnected. So I realized that there were three big codes that really set the tone for how this research, how the results are connected to each other. So these three codes, the sexual minority slash LGBTQ plus, and then the gender identity portion, and then the non-white racial ethnic identity, these are all connected together. These are all what I call identity codes because they are how the subjects identify. They are either sexual minorities, racial ethnic minorities, or they experience gender in certain ways. So that's the core codes. Now these codes relate to these 5 codes right here. And I say 5 because there's 2 right here. So they relate to location. And by location, I mean like whether it's living in the South versus living in the West. By location, I also mean if you're moving around a lot, things like that. So these 3 codes in the middle right here, they relate to location because it's just an external factor that is related to this. For location, the location really does have a relationship with fear of discrimination and inconsistent treatment. So for example, if one of the participants said they were moving around a lot, and that means that they have like inconsistent treatment because they are moving around a lot, they can't access those therapists or mental health professionals as often. Location could also mean fear of discrimination. A lot of the participants said that they felt kind of uncomfortable living in the South because there's not as many LGBT friendly mental health professionals in the South versus like in the North or in the West, things like that. And I did interview a lot of people in the South. So that was one common theme that came up. And I also forgot to mention location, fear of discrimination, inconsistent treatment. These are all codes. So these are how the codes are connected. The next thing that I thought related to these 3 core codes, identity codes, is societal racial expectations. And by that, I mean that society has placed how certain racial and ethnic groups should, in quotation marks, should behave or think or feel or act, specifically in the context of mental health. And this can invoke an emotional response and a want for minority mental health professionals. So for example, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's like a word called the model minority myth in the Asian community, East Asian community. And one of the participants mentioned that, and that really did evoke an emotional response with that participant. One of the Black participants said that there's like a stigma in the Black community about mental health treatment. So that also invoked an emotional response. And again, those are societal racial expectations. These expectations also made the participants want minority mental health professionals. A lot of them mentioned that they would want to seek out a professional that is a person of color or that is LGBT friendly or is a woman, things like that, because of these societal racial expectations. The next thing that connects to these three are experience with white and or male therapists. Some of the participants mentioned that they had a negative experience with a white and or male therapist, usually both white and male therapists. They felt like they weren't understood. And that also leads to wanting minority mental health professionals because of those experiences with white male therapists. So a lot of them said, yeah, if I were to seek out mental health treatment in the future again, or just at all, I would want someone who's a person of color, who's a woman, who's LGBT friendly, like I said before. And finally, these three core identities relate to these two codes right here, which is kind of hard to read. It says financial obstacles and fear of discrimination / not being understood. So, excuse me, these three codes in the middle have a relationship with financial obstacles. Financial obstacles is a big thing regarding mental health treatment, especially in America, where it's not really covered as much by insurance. Some of the participants said that they were having trouble with their insurance not being covered. They didn't have insurance at all, things like that. And that really invoked an emotional response, specifically stress-related emotional responses. And it also related to inconsistent treatment, because if you don't have the money for therapy, if you don't have the money for a psychologist or psychiatrist, you're not going to go as often. You might skip out on some treatments, things like that. And then the final code is fear of discrimination / not being understood, which directly ties in to these three identities, because if you are a sexual minority, if you're a gender minority, if you're a racial ethnic minority, you're probably going to feel like you might be discriminated against or you might not be understood, which definitely invoked an emotional response right here. And it also related to inconsistent treatment, just because, you know, if you feel like you're going to be discriminated against or if you're not going to be understood, you might not go back to that therapist and you might not seek out another therapist, you know, things like that. So that is how I visualized all my codes. And that's basically the results of it. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, I'll give you first crack. I've got a couple of Go ahead.
I guess I could start by introducing myself. So my name's Malia. I'm 18. You know, sociology major, freshman. I'm interested in this because of, you know, wanting to get experience for, you know, how data is obtained in the context of research, because I'm interested in how it's used journalistically. And so far, I don't really have any questions, just more general thoughts about how research works. And one thing I realized while listening to the presentation is how important it is, like, even when something seems like common sense, you know, to come in without preconceived notions, just let the data speak for itself. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I came into this research thinking like, oh yeah, probably this will happen, and probably this will happen. And it really didn't make sense until like I actually analyzed the data and I was like, yeah, this is common sense, but like it's like in a professional setting, it's in a research setting. So now it makes a little more sense qualitatively, I guess, in the research setting. But yeah, the research, like obtaining data, things like that is really important. And may I ask, like, what do you mean by like journalistically? Like just like in the context of like publishing articles and things like that?
Yes, and how people go in conducting interviews, because the point of journalism is to gain factual information, but I notice a lot of journalistic publications benefit from feeding off people's biases.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I'm actually going to submit my research paper to Perpetua, which is our UAH undergraduate research journal. And you can actually, when you do this type of research, you can submit it to the UAH journal. You can submit it to like more professional journals, things like that. So it's a really great experience just for like, just researching and publishing. It's really valuable to publish your data and your research. I think it's a great opportunity to get your name out there, to contribute to academia and research, things like that. So I definitely agree with you on that. Yeah.
Emily, I think that's a great observation. And Ariana spoke a bit about ethics in research, which is really important. And so, yeah, you're really letting the data speak for itself, like you said, and then discovering these patterns. I thought that's really interesting, because you gather this data, but then, what do you do that? How can you look at it in a way that, can make sense to other people? I thought that was great. But Ariana, my question for you is, so do you have some kind of idea, like what's the next step from here? How would you use this data, or how would you like this data to be used in further studies in this area?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that I realized is that there's a need and a want for more minority mental health professionals to exist, for minorities to feel more comfortable getting mental health treatment. So I think this would actually be great. And I hope that more minorities can go into the mental health professional field, so that more minorities who are seeking out mental health treatment could get that treatment and feel comfortable getting treatment. So like more women therapists, more women psychiatrists and psychologists, more people of color that are going into this field, and definitely more LGBT friendly, spaces, because I know there's a lot. Some of my participants mentioned, yeah, I wouldn't go to like somewhere that's not explicitly LGBT friendly because they might try to like convert me, or, things like that. So I think that's really important. I hope that my research can be used in that context. And I know there's some research out there about people of color or LGBT people in the regards to mental health treatment, but like the intersection of these two identities, I feel like would really contribute to academia and make it known that like, yeah, we need more minorities in the mental health field.
That's great. And even that, training in these areas is really important, so that if, therapists aren't, getting training with these kinds of this population, that's very important, I think. So
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm going to stop sharing real quick.
Malia, I'm going to put in the chat, if it works here, just a link to the Summer Community of Scholars program. So yeah, if you're a student here and you're interested, definitely apply. There will be opportunities I think that you might be interested in. Do you have any other questions? Dr. Laney has also joined us. She's Ariana's mentor, as we say over the summer. So I don't know if you had any comments you wanted to make.
Yeah, I just can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say how proud I am of Ariana. I just really enjoy seeing her grow. I had her in public speaking, I believe Ariana's freshman year.
Yeah.
And just getting to see you develop as a researcher and an adult and be so involved and active on campus. It's just really been a cool experience on my side. As far as feedback, I think Ariana did it the right way, which is going to office hours and using the resources available to communicate and make connections with your classmates and also faculty. So that's one thing I always tell freshman students is office hours are not a punishment. I think some people think of going to like a one-on-one meeting, like going to see the principal, like in a high school setting, and that's not the case. It's here as a resource to expand discussion, to ask questions, to get clarification on assignments. So I do encourage you to go to office hours to have those one-on-one conversations with your faculty.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, Dr. Lanius. Usually I ask students, have you visited your professor in the office hours? Like, oh, I'm not having problems in the class. It's like, yeah, you don't need to be having a problem in the class to go visit your professor. It's, talk more in depth about what they covered in class, or, talk about their research or your interests, or, your questions about being academic or something like that. So
Exactly.
and my number one complaint from faculty is that during my office hours, I sit there and I wait and I answer my emails because students don't come and see me. So, they definitely, they have to do it. It's, required for professors who are teaching to have office hours, but they would really like to meet with students, but it's really a student initiative driven kind of thing. And, they're not going to call you in, even if you're not doing well in the class, it's still, you have to go visit the professor. So, go visit your professor. They're really nice people like Dr. Lanius, and, they really like talking about what they do. So.
And I would also say, since that you're a sociology major, I think you're going to have like a great time at UAH. I'm a sociology minor. I've got to know Dr. Sims pretty well. She's great. I have Dr. Seidel for sociology of gender next semester, and I'm very excited about that class. I took sociology of sexuality last semester, and it was like such an amazing class. I also took sociology of race and ethnicity, intro to sociology. All my sociology classes have been amazing. So I would really encourage you, like Dr. Lanius and Mr. Cook said, to, reach out to your professors, and especially your sociology professors, and whatever your minor is, reach out to them too. They're gonna be able to help you a lot with like your classwork, references for like grad school or a future job, things like that. So yeah.
Leah, any final questions, or any more questions, I should say?
Well, I don't have any questions, but I was also thinking, throughout the presentation, building on to my point about how it was important to just let the data speak for itself. I went from feeling like I was just bad at science, like in any context, because, there was such an emphasis on being correct in high school, like to the point where my lab partners would change, what their hypothesis was if they got it incorrect, even if procedure was carried out correctly. And it was very uncomfortable. And, in the past, I've been told, oh, you can't be into science because you're not good with hard facts and data, when really that, like, coming to this is something that opened my eyes to, hey, that's not even true, because, the importance of data is, getting a concrete basis on which, to form opinions, well, not form opinions, but, develop insights about how the world works, instead of, being right all the time. And with the social science, I feel like people don't consider it science as often because there's not as much opportunity for a person to be objectively right as in, hard sciences.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like sometimes people don't take social sciences seriously, but there's no reason for that. Social sciences are still really important. They contribute a lot to society, especially in the field of academia and research. So I think it's really important, like you were saying.
Okay, so also the thing about hard sciences is if it's more acceptable to, I don't know, it feels like it's more acceptable to get things wrong despite the emphasis on correctness, because social sciences aren't taken seriously in the first place. So if you're wrong as a social scientist, it's like, oh, well, you're stupid. But if you're in the hard sciences and mess up, it's just like, oh, well, there are all these factors you had trouble controlling for. And, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the social sciences, I think it's really interesting because a lot of what I was taught in a lot of my sociology classes is that there's multiple perspectives for everything in the social sciences. Like one person could view it this way, one person could view it that way. It doesn't necessarily mean like that person's wrong. They just view it in a different way. So that's one of the reasons I really like social sciences, is because there is that room for interpretation in a lot of ways. And that's one thing you have to be careful of when you're doing research in social sciences, is you don't want to put your own biases into your own research. Yeah, you kind of have to let the data speak for itself with your help, obviously, to make sure the interview process or however you're collecting data is going smoothly. But that's one thing I really enjoy about social sciences, is that there's not really one right answer. There can be lots of different interpretations for things.
I also feel like people are have this uncomfortable relationship with, what's considered factual. And by that I mean people rely on facts as not as a basis to, gain helpful insights off of, but as a way to say they're right, as a way to say they're right and have that not be taken away from them. Because a lot of people in our world feel like they have trouble being taken seriously. And, facts, like in a world of false meritocracy, it feels like, you can't get rid of it. And eventually, if people aren't listening to you, they're going to have to, because, well, this is fact. It's like people want a simple way of how the world works and sort of try to use concrete fact as a way to get to that, when in reality, facts can only tell you part of the story, because there's so much that can't be objectively measured, like not even with qualitative data.
Sorry, I couldn't get myself unmuted. But yeah, I think it's just really interesting how like you were saying, everything can't be measured by facts. Some things are very interpretive. And I've really realized that in my communications classes as well at UAH, because if we're like reading a piece of, like in my rhetorical criticism class, I think that's what it was called, rhetorical something. It was like a few semesters ago. We always read these like journal articles, things like that, and we had to like interpret them in a way of like theory. So there was different theories in the communications world and in the realm of communications, and we have to interpret the data, so to speak, like the text that we were reading in the context of those different theories. So I think that's pretty interesting. And that's one thing you'll probably learn in sociology. There's a ton of different theories that you'll learn in your intro class. I think there's a sociology theory class. I'm not completely sure, but you do learn about the theories in some of your sociology classes. And those will be really important. And you'll have to like know them off the tip of your tongue for like, sociology, those specialty sociology classes, because you'll have to be like, okay, well, I have to look back at this theory for this concept kind of thing. So I think that's really interesting. I'm a big theory person. I love those kind of things. So if you think like different interpretations are cool, I think you'll like the theories.
I do really look forward to sociology as a major because it's one of those things where, like, as I read more into it, like, from what I was told science is, it's really ironic how many scientists are really afraid to look in and discover things and discover they were wrong all along. And I feel like sociology is one of those things that makes you confront, that fear of being wrong more than anything else. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this, a lot of social facts seems like common sense when in reality it isn't, because there are so many factors and nuance that you hadn't thought of consciously. And I think the interesting thing about sociology research is, you know, the value it has for improving material states of living, like with your research on therapy in regards to LGBTQ plus and people of color, people in need of mental health services. Like, I think what looking at who needs therapy and how they need it can potentially lead to, a lot of reform, because as a person who falls under both of those categories, I definitely see the merit in those. And, you know, I don't have as extreme experiences as other people, but I do a lot of reading about how the model of therapy, psychology, and psychiatry is pretty incomplete and outdated. And, you know, sociology is good because it can be used for, what needs to be improved. How does this affect people? How will these improved citizens interact with the rest of the world?
Sorry, my mute button is like not working today. um, my unmute button, I guess I want to call it. But yeah, I think that's really definitely important for, just improving society. I think sociology is one of the best majors for that. You learn about the world, you learn about how people interact in the world, different social groups, things like that. So I really enjoy my sociology classes. I think if you're anything like me and you enjoy learning about the world and how things work, different theories, I think you'll really like sociology. And again, like the professors in the sociology department are great. I think they're pretty awesome from my experiences. So I think you'll have a great time there.
And I guess I finally do have a question. Like, I noticed that UIH is a very techie school, and I'm in Huntsville. I've lived here for a good while, so I've been pretty acquainted with UIH, like even doing a dual enrollment from, freshman to junior year of high school. So, and during all of this, I haven't met that many humanities majors, especially not, with my particular major and career interests. Like, I eventually want to be, in journalism, which is why I was looking at things for how this stuff affects journalism. Like, I don't know, it feels like there are not very many people like me. And, I do sort of worry about that because I'm very good at, having discussions, but not very good at having, you know, casual conversation with people my age.
So one thing I'll recommend that you might investigate for your minor is we do have a writing program that is co-shared with the English department and the communication arts department. And there are a lot of classes in the writing major that would be applicable for the writing program covers technical writing, journalism, media writing, public relations, the full spectrum of different writing careers. But it certainly could work for you going into journalism. So I would encourage you to look at that when you get here in the fall.
Yeah, and as for like not meeting a lot of humanities majors, I promise you, once you get into your major, it's like a little community. When you get into your major classes, even like some of your intro classes, you'll meet a lot of great people who are humanities majors. I didn't think I would meet that many, but honestly, I've met a lot of humanities major. My best friend is a political science major. I have so many other friends that are humanities majors. I think it's really nice because you form a little bit of a community once you get into those core classes for your major. You'll start to recognize like every single person in your class, and your classes are so small for your core major classes that it's really nice. You know, it's not one of those big lecture classes where you're just sitting there taking notes. It's one of those interactive classes so that you can like, you know, talk to your peers, talk to your professor, and form a community.
That's pretty reassuring because, you know, like I came from being in like this dual enrollment program where, you know, it was about, I guess, around just over 20 something people my age. And then I had to go, you know, through this process of college and at the same time as high school. And, you know, I didn't even get along with like the one person with the same interest as me. And, you know, knowing that, you know, it gets better in college, that it's a lot. It's it's good. And I was definitely coming out of my comfort zone, you know, attending this meeting because I've been interested in how research works for a while. And, you know, I've made it a goal of mine to get more involved in my interest in college because, you know, UIH is pretty well structured with, you know, all the different interest groups. So I guess I don't have any more questions. I just want to thank you all for the information you've provided and this opportunity.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad it's been useful and it's been great having you. Ariana, thanks. That was a great presentation. I'm really looking forward to your poster. Malia, there's going to be a poster session in the fall. We haven't set a date yet. It's usually around the second week of September, but it'll be announced. And so Ariana will be there standing next to her poster, and you'll be able to, you know, talk to her more about the research and, you know, find out what else she's discovered between now and that time. So please also come to that.
Yes, thank you so much for coming.
You like, you know, at first I thought it was going to be like a lot more students, but it looks like I'm the only, you know, student that like besides Ariana that came. And you know, I should have expected that because I noticed with UIH, you know, a lot of the big group oriented stuff is sort of towards the tech majors and like meeting the humanities people, like even at orientation, like it just seems like a chaotic time, you know, navigating like the pandemic stuff. And but I do think it will get better, and I am sort of grateful in ways that, you know, this meeting was so small because I have a lot of insights and I enjoy discussing it. And like none of the friends I've made in high school like have the same interest as me. So it's sort of useful to have like a small little forum, like even if for, you know, just several minutes out of a day to be able to just learn more about the field I'm interested in and to discuss those insights.
Great. Okay, well, thanks everyone. yeah, Malia, definitely look us up in the fall. We look forward to seeing you. Ariana, thanks again. Dr. Lanius, thanks as always. And we'll see you all later.
All right. Bye.
Great job, Ariana.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.